So I'm talking alone because I didn't really know how to phrase questions with somebody to ask. I was just like, I'm better at ranting anyway. Yeah.
And you have graffiti behind you, just like Mercer.
It's a mirror.
Like Mercer?
Oh, that. Yeah, so I wasn't sure what to talk about. And then Evan gave me a suggestion. He said, talk about your complex. And I was like, cool. Yeah. So what he means is I joke about the fact that I have like a hero complex all the time, or a warrior complex. And so I decided, oh, that's a good thing to talk about. So this is actually a 3-part thing that will involve audience participation. So my poetic title for it is called The Life of a Howl, Living with a Warrior Complex. So there's actually 2 parts that I want to talk about. So both of them have kind of been a part of my life since I was really little. One is what I call the Howl, and one is what I call like my warrior complex or my hero complex. One is something I've lived with since forever. It's just been part of me, which is the Howl. The other is something I've wanted to be since I can remember. The Howl is kind of an outward thing, like it's a call that comes from somewhere else to me, and the warrior is an inner mantra that I like to proclaim outwards that I'm working on refining. So I'm going to talk about the Howl first, because I think it's more important. And then I'll talk about the warrior, and then I'll talk about the part where they get to meet under an oak tree. Okay, so some of this writing is actually, Lois isn't here because she's in Cuba, but for Asia, we had to write like a biography about ourselves, and I was like, I don't remember anything about myself, so I went back to read it, and most of this is like copied and pasted from that. So citing myself, I'm not plagiarizing. So some of it's pretty poetic because it is. So I'm gonna just start. So here we go. Deep inside me, there is an inaudible howl, always ready to shake my bones. Sometimes the sunset can set it off, other times the wind off the salt water draws it out. The utter impossibility of nature's beauty tends to confound me, and sometimes I think my senses shut out some of the beauty around me, because if I could take it all in at once, I might die. Nature is usually the trigger, though also music, dance, and certain people can unleash it as well. The howl feels like my soul recognizing and pulling desperately towards something that smells of home or of whatever world my spirit belongs to. When the howl reaches its peak, I cannot tell if pain or joy rushes through me. And my hunch is that it's both. The simultaneous realization that what I long for exists and that I am separated from it. So that's kind of my abstract definition of the howl. So it's something that's influenced me a lot throughout my life. When I was really little, I used to experience this, especially on windy days. I'd just be out there and all of a sudden I'd feel like this, like it was painful, like this painful, like, whoa, I just experienced the world and all it is. And I was really poetic, and so I'd go in and be like, Mom, I was howling again. And she'd be like, what? And so I would write about it instead, and like I was like a lot of, little like kind of warrior kids. If it wasn't a horse, it was a wolf that I identified myself with. But what's interesting about it is it's become more than just like, elation in nature. And so it's definitely influenced my passions, my concerns. Its presence or absence is often determined for me which path to choose. Because it represents for me a certain kind of joy and a certain kind of connection to what I believe is the kingdom of God, is God in me and God in the world. And God out of the world. And so ultimately, I found that whenever I'm following its pull, I'm going in the right direction. There's a long period of time in my childhood where I kind of lost it. I just didn't think about it. And then it came back. And I thought that this was just a me thing, since I couldn't explain it very well, until I read C.S. Lewis's Surprised by Joy. Mm-hmm. And what he talks about in that book is like, he calls what I would call the howl joy. So that moment of just recognizing something. It's not so much seeing, inventing, or picking up something. It's just recognizing something. And the more you try to hold on to it, the more it disappears. And so that was the first time that I was like, whoa, this is a real thing. And that was cool. I still like calling it the howl, though, instead of joy, because, So though it sounds intangible, the presence of this howl both when it's kind of dormant or when it's bursting from the marrow, awakens my desire to reach the world it calls to and to become a trigger for other howlers. So one big part of this has been like, after reading C.S. Lewis, was there's other people out there who experience this recognition of something that we belong to, and not necessarily being able to reach. So this is the first part of audience participation, which is really just a question. Before I move on to kind of the warrior side, which is more the rant part, I wanted to kind of open the floor to people who either have questions about what I mean by the howl, or who want to express what, if they've experienced that, or what they've called it in their lives if they've experienced it. Or anything at all to do with it, or you can just talk about wolves if you want to.
Use the word guttural reaction yesterday. What does that mean?
Guttural reaction?
Guttural? It's like a body
Yeah, it does the blah.
I experienced that when I was thinking about food. Chris, last night.
Yeah.
I heard about it and I just went, blah. But it's also like, yeah, it just makes me happy. But other times I experience it as well.
Yeah.
Nature and stuff.
Food, nature. I mean, nature triggers it.
Howl.
Ocean, music,
Did you raise your hand?
I did.
Okay.
I just didn't want to distract your attention from Sarah.
You were going to say dancing too.
Well, if that doesn't make you howl, I don't know what. I forget his name, the beat poet guy who did the poem called Howl. Have you ever seen if there's a point of connection? I think it's probably pretty different, but I was just curious.
What? Who?
I think it's a famous long poem called Howl. Anyone?
Oh, I will write that
What's his
down on
name?
the list.
Was it Jack Kerouac?
Not Kerouac, was the other big one.
That was the one.
Beowulf.
Anyway, just curious.
Cool. I'll look it up. It's just like a long poem. I can deal with that.
I think like book length long howl. I think it's book length long.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
Wow.
You doubt me, Agnes? Challenge accepted. Okay. So if anybody has questions at any point, just raise your hand. But yeah.
I was gonna add.
No, you go ahead. I just like, oh, there's a hand.
Yeah, when I read C.S. Lewis's Surprised by Joy, I was like, what? You call that joy? I call it like the ache usually. The ache, yeah. And I like how you call it howl because that's just a good image for me.
Those moments in life where you experience the highest of highs and the lowest of lows of humanity, and it all comes together in one.
So
Happened
painful.
last night.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
It is.
That's like pretty good. It's like that's why like for me it's a howl because like dogs howling at the moon is like beautiful and so sad and you're like I don't even know why. It's just it's both.
You feel both at the same time.
Ray, did you
I was just
see?
gonna say that I definitely connect with that. I never connected it with Howl, and that's really cool. I like your connection with that. But for me, it is maybe more akin to like an ache, or like this connection to like transcendence or something like that. And for me, it's often when I'm reading a really good book that does have that whole like. It happens in so many ways, like nature, absolutely. Nature in like moments of beauty, moments of pain. But like also in a book where it's like, it really pushes you to like grapple with the really tough stuff of life, but in a way that it's like, there's this possibility to transcend and like, and potentially go past that as well. So it's like an acceptance, but it's also like a moving forward or whatever, or striving at the same time. So.
Yeah, the movement part. Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
It's really cool that you mentioned like the movement part because that's a big part of it too. Is like in the moment, sometimes it just feels for me like a situation that I'm in, but it almost always inspires a movement for me. It's so.
Yeah.
I think everybody kind of experiences it a little differently, but it's and a reaction to different things, but I feel like that's an important aspect of it. That if it is calling you to something, it's calling you through something or to something, like it's a movement aspect.
It's funny that you kind of think of it as howl, because to me it's like a whisper, like this like voice, it's like kind of calling you out, like when I'm out in nature, or like you said, like a beautiful sunset, it's just like, or you're inside and you're stuck inside and you see like the beauty of the world outside, and you just feel like that call to just like go out into the world and experience like nature and life, and just like
Love it.
I experience it as a gasp. It's like surprise.
Oh,
Like turning around a corner and suddenly this thing you've never anticipated is right there. And it's such a surprise.
what triggers it for you? All sorts of things.
I think if I know what we're talking about, I think for me it feels a lot like a stream or like a flow. And it's usually music that triggers it. Usually when I'm playing music, sometimes maybe 5% of the time when I play, it just comes. And I might be playing something simple, but I just feel connected in a weird way with whatever. And then afterwards I'm like, that wasn't even like good music. Or I don't know, yeah.
Feels like you're facing the truth of the universe, like the actual truth of everything.
Connection is a big word too. Like movement, connection, those are big ones. But it's definitely like kind of what I've been hearing from you guys, most of you, and what I've experienced, is that it's not just connection just to the food or the nature or the music. It's like it's almost like it's becoming a bridge to something else. So that's probably why I trust it more than the individual things. Like I don't trust the tree as much as I trust the howl that came from the tree. Are there any other, like I'm totally willing to stick with kind of this because I think it's really cool that everybody else has this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you described yours in my journaling. I try to journal every day, and the word that I often comes up in describing kind of what you're saying is a surge. And it's so, for me, it's very visceral sometimes. Like it'll be, like I'll feel like it's a cramp or something that's, it's kind of like some kind of expansion, and it's kind of, you can't contain the glory of whatever you're kind of sensing. And I remember like first kind of being able to articulate it when I was probably like 8 or 9, and I read Narnia. And like crying because it was so like, oh, if there's something there, oh, like yeah, like home, or yeah, like and you always, for me, it always comes with a sense of sadness that's completely interlocked with that sense of joy. Like it cannot be separated. So it's not an undesirable sadness, but I've never experienced it without sadness, because it's kind of like, oh, like it's not here. It's not here. Like I will not have this yet. Yeah. Yeah. But it's always like that surge. Yeah, the way you articulated that is really cool. Yeah, like the surge is such a good image for me too, and again like that, like when I was saying how like I can't tell if it's pain or joy, so sorrow or joy, and I'm like it's literally both. Like it's literally like this connection to. The reason why I kind of tend to associate it directly with God and the kingdom of God, and it's because to me it often serves as a reminder too. It's not just like a, here's your little pop of drugs for the day to get you through. Like it isn't like that. It's almost always like forces me to remember that there's more than what I'm working with here. Yeah, it's like it's definitely tinged with sorrow because we're waiting. There's a scene in a movie that I recently watched where it's a film about St. Francis, and there's a scene where I watched with Emily and a couple others, and there's a scene where the lepers were a big thing at that time, and nobody wanted to be around them, and they were ostracized, and there's this scene where he like deliberately chooses to go up to this man who's like anticipating that he's gonna get slapped or something because he's kind of the disgrace to society. And St. Francis just comes up to him and like presses his lips against the guy's like infected face. And it was one of those moments where I felt that you're like, oh my gosh, like that. I don't know what that is. That's it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of like to me brings a new meaning to the word like supernatural, as in it's above the natural. Like it's not something that I can induce. It's not endorphins. It's not just being in the flow. It's like, because I can't conjure it up. Like it's not something that just, it's something that comes to you sometimes.
I was thinking a lot about place, like for me, home, time at home, but also being away. Quite honestly, I think if I'm on a window seat in an airplane, and I'm aware that I'm flying, it's just bonkers when I'm flying above the earth right now, this fast and going wherever I'm going. I really have a lot of moments, and I tend to, if I can, write a lot in that space, but then I also think for me, PEI, which I haven't lived there long term for many, many years, but to me it feels like home, and certain places that to me I return to. So there's kind of like the going, when I find I'm going somewhere new or I'm about to enter into an environment that shakes me in different ways, I tend to find it and see that there. But then there's also the sadness and joy, because every time I leave my familiar, every time I leave home, I feel sad, but also joy, usually where I'm going. But then there's also the, like, I have to leave these other places and I get to go back home and I get to go back.
It's not complete without returning.
Yeah, but there's just a place to me, it's very evocative in that sense. It's not always familiar, but it brings up. Yeah.
That's super cool. Does anybody have anything else before I go ahead?
That I identified with the word home that a number of people use. And to me, that's connected with a sense of belonging. And the way that I was sort of imaging it is often I feel like I've got sharp edges on me, and somehow, because of circumstances or my own nerve, whatever, so I don't really fit. But at those moments, all the sharp edges come off and I just slide into a place where I really belong.
Wow.
I think probably the worst thing to do would be to psychologically analyze it, so I thought I would try. So, I'm thinking about the joy and sadness that so many of us can relate to that, that combination of the, like having such a beautiful thing, all that is so poignant. And for me, I wonder if part of it is this sense of, I can't grasp it, I can't capture it, and so the sadness is that it eludes, and yet that's where the joy comes from too. Because I'm so happy there's more than I can grasp, and more than I can capture, and it's something hugely joyful about these sense.
It's like joyful frustration.
Yeah.
It's like if you wanted to drink the entire, like an endless well, you'd be like, oh my gosh, like I just can't drink all of it, but there's more. Yay! I heard somebody use that analogy in like when somebody was frustrated that they couldn't know everything. They're like, if you're so interested in knowledge, like why are you disappointed when it's a never-ending well? Like, if you're thirsty, you want a never-ending well. Anyway, that's really cool. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to kind of add or say before I kind of go into second part? Go ahead.
I think I experience it as beauty, mostly, and I think that's probably why I'm an English major, because I experience it in all those like, beautiful novels and texts a lot. Yeah, and I experience it as the wind, like pushing and pulling, and drawing. And another little thing was I read Till We Have Faces in the Summer by C.S. Lewis, and one part was it's kind of complicated, but this sister gets offered up to this god of the mountain to prevent this plague. Sorry.
It's a retelling of the story of Cupid and
Kind
Psyche.
of
Yeah. And she said, like, I always felt the god of the mountain was wooing me to this. Yeah, that's like,
That's so cool.
this is wooing. Yeah.
I think like I can relate to everybody's descriptions, but just like profundity, I think, like and meaning, like when I'm out in nature or like in that moment when the wind is like whipping around me and I like feel that resonance, it's like this is profound, like has worth, like and meaning, and I'm a part of it. And and that whole aspect of knowing that there's something more too, because I think the pain could become really bitter if you don't believe that there's some that there's more, that you can know more. So, yeah.
it kind of evokes like you need to have like a bit of trust and hope too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think without like a level of hope kind of that you're talking about, it could pretty easily turn into kind of almost a despairing thing because it's always out of grasp.
Yeah.
I found, not all the time, but a lot of the times when I start hitting that place of resonance, it's not something I can just sit still and take. So I often start dancing. Yeah, like a good piece of music. Like there is times when there is value in just sitting there and receiving it, and that I'm incapable of moving. But more often than not, I'll want to get up and physically embody what I'm feeling. Yeah, and I was just immediately, when you said that, the first thing I thought of, and the earliest memory I have of this, is dancing in a rainstorm, which I used to love doing as a kid, but my mom would be all like, "You're gonna get electrocuted."
Yeah, there's a downside.
So she would never let me go out in the worst of storms. Mom!
Which is the best of times. It's like,
just let me live my life.
There's a risk to living, Mom. You gotta go. Yeah, I'm the same. Whenever like it comes to me, especially from the woods, and the wind has a big thing to do with it, kind of like what you're saying. And back on PEI, the wind often has like a salt breeze in it, and there's something about it, and it's like, so like as soon as that happens, I pretty much want to go full Pocahontas. Like I'm like, put a braid in my hair and start singing, and I have done that alone. Like, yeah. I remember I also remember English not being an efficient language for me to convey my feelings because nothing was like, and I don't speak any other languages. So when I went to the school I went to before this one, we took like a few Latin classes, and all I knew were some Latin hymns, and they didn't express anything super profound either. But I was like, I would go down to this lake alone, and like I would just like belt out Latin hymns. And I was like, I'm connected! And it was a great way to deal with it. And then if someone came along, it wasn't like they couldn't understand what I was saying, so I sounded like mystical. And like, I mean, to the residents in Barry's Bay, Ontario, like, who were all like mostly Polish, they were like, another Latin. Like, you know, like, it was great. It was great. So yeah, so that's kind of, so action is a big part of it. It's very hard to hold in. And the worst time has ever happened to me was at work once. I like stepped outside this little theater, and it's right off the road. This massive wind full of salt spray just came up, and I like almost screamed. Like I was like, and I had to go back inside. I was like, so I kept like delaying, and then like my boss was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I just had my arms open and my coat was blowing, and people were starting to come in for like the show that was being played, and I was like, it's a theater, they can expect drama, like, you know, so it's the worst though when you can't enjoy it, but like, yeah. So, well, yeah.
Just on that note of like needing to go, like to put something into action, like sometimes I've felt frustrated with not knowing the right action to express what I'm feeling. So like dancing could be one thing, but it's usually not my response. But it's almost, I think there's this frustration in feeling like there's some way that I feel compelled to respond, but I don't know what that is yet. What that. And so in some ways it's almost like a calling, but like into it, but you don't know what to do with it. And so it does create this huge longing and this frustration and confundity, etc.
Yeah, especially if you don't actually dance like Pocahontas, or you know, like,
maybe I should practice more.
You just braid the spear.
Yeah, there's nothing that ruins that moment more than being like, I'm gonna run through the field and then getting out of breath after 30 seconds.
I felt so epic. But I am only
like you start training like for the moments. Yeah.
It's like an ache within an ache.
Oh yeah, because it's the ache, and then it's the ache to respond to the ache, and you're just like. Yeah, ironically, it's normally when I'm most silent because I just can't. I'm like I'm having an interior seizure. That's great. It's a very beautiful, painful seizure. So, what time is it? Because we only have like a little bit of time. Oh, I have like 20 minutes of your guys' time.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. He says 10, I say 20. Well, since there's only 10 minutes, maybe it would be too much to switch into like the second half. So what do you guys want to keep talking about howls, or do you want to hear about the second part?
Second part.
Okay. I'll read it really fast. Okay. So the warrior side is connected, but only in the end. So the first part is going to sound unrelated, just so you all know. So, when I was a kid, tomboy is definitely the first word I used to describe my warrior problem. I didn't like the word princess. Eventually I was like, queen is okay. Guys, chill. It's okay. I'm not actually that arrogant. So as I've been trying to like throughout my life, I definitely tried to grow hero traits, and I had this whole list of what that meant, right? Definitely favored Joan of Arc and all these other people, and like I was like, the rest are fine. Like Joan of Arc. Anyway, so I did discover a lot of things about who I actually am throughout that. So in my quest to become a warrior, what I actually encountered was a lot of paradoxes in my life. A lot of which were explained when I took the Myers-Briggs test. Which I
Workshop happening next week.
So y'all, it'll explain your life. So some of these paradoxes. So I am paradoxes and problems is what I told Lois, so she knows a lot about me. I'm introspective yet loud, brilliant yet confused, argumentative yet peace-seeking. As a homeschooled person, I'm independent and curious and a dedicated learner, but as a graduate of high school, I am in love with sports and people and disillusioned by the education system. As the eldest of 5, I'm a leader and bossy and used to conflict, but in the world, I love coming to people's aid and trying to lead, but I'm a little clumsy with conflict. In a pinch, common sense will always trump authority. But leadership is valuable to me. If I recognize it in you. The last one is, in a pinch, common sense will always trump authority for me. Though I do respect leadership. Yeah. Which there's a difference for me, which is another whole thing. As my father's daughter, I'm a deep thinker and an analyzer. As my mother's daughter, I'm a fixer and a brainstormer. As the daughter of both of them, I live with depression and anxiety and demons that I strive to tame, if not necessarily exercise. As a Catholic, I'm steeped in a sense of tradition and the newness of each day in faith. And I can think two seemingly opposing things at the same time with equal passion. So. He's like, yeah. This often comes out as me taking every side. All the time. If there's a car accident and like it's clearly one person's fault, I'm like, they probably missed coffee this morning. Like, they killed a man, they missed their coffee. Like, you know, so like some of these things that I think intensely at the same time is like, don't glorify violence, criminals and terrorists deserve punishment, and then the other side of the exact same coin is, don't dehumanize criminals and terrorists. They're still people and they have a story. And so like that's like an example of something that I have to hold in contention all the time. But it's not really in contention, it just is in my head. Hold on to your convictions, your principles against all the misunderstandings of your peers, but treat people with every ounce of respect you don't have for their principles. So that's I recently heard on a Tumblr thread, like somebody was saying, I'm stuck between the like, I don't give an F what anybody thinks and I care deeply about everybody. Yeah. And somebody said, do no harm but take no shit. Yeah. And I was like, that's really helpful. I found that my pendulum swings a wide arc and I'm always seeking both sides of the story. I was seeking balance. Balance is a word I'm often laughed at for using because I employ it so often. I strive for it, demand it, attempt to live by it, fail, try again. And failing to achieve balance is definitely the biggest of my regrets throughout life. Most regrets I have to do with the lack of balance. The time I speak so strongly about justice and forget to include mercy. The time I tried to show support with understanding but was too scared to tell somebody the hard truth they needed to hear. And the many, many times each day when I say too much or too little. That is my biggest one. I gave up over talking for Lent. It's not going well.
Wasn't this supposed to be a silent fireside?
Yeah. Hey, I give you guys way more talking time than anyone ever does. Practice. Thank you. So all of these things, all these complexes and all these things I'm trying to deal with are often me trying to find the way to be the bestest, most honorable, wise, capable hero ever. I want to be Joan of Arc, like a Viking warrior poet, and eventually the wise old turtle from Kung Fu Panda. That's my long-term goal. And this is where we get to the third part, which I can wrap up hopefully quickly. And that is that there's a place where the warrior and the howl meet, and where there's a vision that comes attached. And there's a world in my mind, maybe in my heart, where I can realize in a visual way the thoughts and feelings attached to the howling, while seeing the real version of the hero I actually want to be. And it's pretty abstract, so just bear with me. This is another poetic part that now Lois, I feel like Lois knows way too much about me now. Actually, I'm like reading this, I'm like, did I give this to her? Like, what? She liked it, so I was okay. So there's a world in my head that I literally do go to sometimes, and I've written about it in my journal because it's very helpful for me visually. So in this world, there's a giant oak tree, and it's on a gentle hill, surrounded by fields of yellow grass, specifically yellow, it's not green. And the world's light is usually hazy, somewhere in between bright and dusky. There's a wild river. It courses specifically from the north to the southeast, through a beautifully barren expanse of rocky plains. Mountains line the horizon from the east, all the way around to the south, and then end somewhere in the west. The significance of this space is the home it provides to a version of myself I can observe and strive to become. Because somewhere in that world, with the giant oak tree, the howl and the warrior meet in a woman who runs without tiring through the swaying sea of grass. Thigh deep, she stops occasionally to feel the yellow stalks between her fingers. One arm bears a warrior's mark, the other the sign of a healer. Her legs plant firmly while her soul explores, and her lips spill questions wiser than my answers. Sometimes she looks at me, a ghost in her world, and smiles. And her smiles is sympathy and certainty that I can be her, that I am her someday. When I am her, my wolf, my howl, will become an eagle. My howl will become a scree because it will no longer be trapped within me. This woman I hope to be is lovingly detached from the world, invested in people, but not restricted by the boundaries of physical concerns or fear of rejection. She is the person who writes the novel even though it sucks, paints and draws without fears of mistake, takes care of her body with discipline, and loves herself with mercy. She is the person who, with 1 week left to live, could continue on as usual because she is living in a way prepared for death, living with an intentionality that leaves no room for the regret of the procrastinator. Her depression has become a source of understanding and empathy rather than despair, and her fierceness burns steadily through her tears. She does not distrust herself or overanalyze social situations. She is a mama bear and not a protective mother hen. She has learned how to listen and when to speak, and people can come to her for comfort and encouragement as well as truth and joy, and she is balance. And that is everything I have to say to you guys. Anybody has like really quick questions. Oh, we have like 2 minutes, guys. If anybody has really quick questions, you can ask them, or if you have any more thoughts, because I think it's important that people can dialogue about their experiences.
That woman that you described at the end, I've seen her.
Yeah.
It's coming. Someday I'll be able to run forever.
Everything to every single detail.
Yeah, it's. Bits and pieces.
No, it's more than this.
Oh, thanks.
Very beautiful.
So the next Howl meeting is going to be, we're going to be singing Colors of the Wind. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Today?
Perfect.
Tonight.
We'll gather at 9 p.m.